We're here with George Hage. It is our opening night, and he is going to be the our performer kicking off this series. George, thank you so much for doing our show, and thank you so much for taking a few minutes to talk with us ahead of time.
Yeah, looking forward to putting on some real pants and getting out of the house and coming to hang out with you guys.
So you grew up in Charlotte, as I understand, and you got into the music scene there. You liked watching bands and everything. What were some cool? And that's also the time you got into art, like comic books and stuff.
Yeah,
Um, do you remember the moments for both with drawing and also with music, those moments where you're like, hey, I could do that, or I'd like to take a stab at that?
yeah. I think it took years before I hit the "Hey, I could do that" moment. But uh, I think with art and comics, that was really early on. I remember being like 9 years old and drawing and trying to draw and uh, slowly getting into comics. And that's back when
Mm.
they had comics at the grocery stores and
Oh, yeah,
drugstores.
yeah.
So I'd go to the grocery store with my mom or dad, and occasionally they'd let me get something, and that eventually rolled into going to the comic shop. There was a shop in Charlotte that's still around called Heroes Aren't Hard to Find,
Oh, okay.
and really uh, being surrounded by books and art, and kind of took off from there. And then around age 13 is where I had the opportunity to take guitar lessons, and trying to think of the bands, like, we would pick up Guitar World and Guitar Player and all the guitar magazines, and the music in there
Mhm.
was like Nirvana songs, uh, and some classic rock, a lot of Hendrix and stuff like that. But that really kind of took over for a few years, and then when I got to college, started playing in band. Well, really in high school and in college, started playing in bands, and then doing some regional touring with bands, and kind of kept going with that.
I mean, it's a standard question to ask a musician who your influences were, but I'm also curious from an art and a comic standpoint.
Yeah.
Who are some comic artists that really inspired you?
Yeah, well, and it's awesome. I remember as a teenager, the Guitar World and maybe some of the other ones too, they would always have a centerfold poster.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah,
one
yeah.
side would be a badass guitar player in some cool, position. And then the other side was usually album art or poster art.
Oh,
So
okay.
I didn't even realize that I was getting sucked into the artwork, but would hang up the posters, and sometimes it'd be like Jimmy Page from Zeppelin or Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, and then other times it'd be someone I wasn't as into as much. So I'd
Yeah.
use the other side, which was a concert poster, cool art. And it took years before I realized. One of the guys I now follow on Instagram, Alan Forbes, did a bunch of stuff for the Black Crowes back in the '90s, and I
Okay.
had his stuff on the wall, and I didn't know who the artist was until a couple years ago. I made the connection. But I think art-wise, I mean, with the comics, Bill Sienkiewicz was a huge fan of his work, and John Buscema, uh, mostly from the Wolverine books. He was one of my favorite characters
Okay.
growing up. And then musically, I mean, Hendrix was a huge influence. I feel like any kid that picks up guitar and is into rock and roll or classic rock at all, like, you're gonna connect with Hendrix. And Hendrix always had cool style, cool artwork.
Hmm.
Um, but also loved Zeppelin, loved Kiss at the time, and I think a lot of it was into the art and branding and marketing, and Grateful Dead for the same reason. I think, uh, especially as a kid and somewhat now, I was more into the Grateful Dead's artwork and branding than I was their music. Although I really love some Grateful Dead stuff.
I watched the music video for your latest single, Jack the Radio's latest single, "Creatures," and that one is actually like a motion comic book, which I
Yeah,
assume you drew. Talk a little bit about that, because that's I mean, it's just one, it's really cool looking, and it's neat to see something like a full 4-minute animated video, but that also seems like again, like more production value than you would get from the average music video these days. So how did that come about?
yeah, that was a super cool project, and I actually did not draw it. I wish I had drawn it.
Oh, okay.
but that is, so our newest record is called Creatures. And in addition to the record, we also did a companion comic book. So I
Oh, okay.
actually adapted each song from the record into comic book scripts and worked with professional comic book artists from around the world. So it was 30 illustrators and colorists from,
Oh,
I think,
wow.
8
Okay.
countries.
Okay,
That
so
had come
that
to
comic
draw
you
drawing.
wrote, but other people did the artwork for.
Yep,
Okay, cool.
yep. And then I ended up doing the layout for the book, so the design for the book, and lettering. I mean, I kind of just picked up where we needed someone to fill in. So I lettered some of the comic stories. I did a pinup for the book. But a lot of the heavy lifting was from some of my favorite comic book artists that are working in the industry right now.
Nice. So,
And to answer your question on the music video, so we had the comic and we had this art for the physical comic book.
mhm.
And when COVID hit, we had planned to actually shoot a music video, but we didn't really know much about what was going on. We didn't feel comfortable trying to get a crew of people and get locations and everything like that. So we're kind of thinking about options, and was actually working with the publisher and the COO, Justin Zimmerman, who worked for the publisher. Uh, he was creating a like animated preview for the comic, which they've been doing for a lot of their books, which is super cool. So when I
Kind of
saw
like a
that,
trailer for when the book comes out.
exactly, so it
Gotcha.
was like an
Okay.
animated trailer using art from the book. So we basically took that, I think it was a 60-second video, maybe a 90-second video, and then we
Okay.
added additional content, pulled additional content from the comic, and his team at Bricker Down Productions actually animated it, pulled it all together. He directed it, and yeah, so in that sense it was higher production value than we could have done. Just to pull all the art together
Mhm.
was a huge effort. And then his team was very generous as far as their time, and I think the amount of work that they put in to actually animate it and get everything edited.
So yeah, you mentioned Creatures. I was listening to that album, and it's definitely got a little more of a little more southern, little more country sound than some of your earlier stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about the evolution of Jack the Radio's sound, and also Jack the Radio is not the only band you're involved in. So, what are some of your other projects, and how have the sounds of those, I guess, your overall interest in sounds evolved over the years?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing to point out, which is I was thinking about this today, actually, knowing that we were going to talk, is uh, Jack the Radio started technically with our old lead singer AC Hill and I in 2005, so 15
Oh,
years
wow.
ago. And it was around 2010 that we got a full band together. And 2011 we put our first record out. But yeah, I mean, so in 10 years, things change. We've had lineup changes. You don't want to make the same record over and over.
Right.
So it's definitely evolved. And with this new record, it's actually, we solidified a 4-piece lineup where previously we've mostly been a 5-piece.
Okay.
So AC is no longer playing with us, which means I had to pick up a lot more vocal duties than I had on previous records, which was scary and exciting at the same time. But then we also brought in Kevin Rader on drums, and Dan Grinder, who you may have seen with Gray Young,
Okay.
on bass. And then Danny Johnson and Danny and I have been playing together for 10 years in this band. But yeah, I mean, the evolution's changed. It's still some of the kind of swampy rock with a little bit of blues,
Hmm.
rock and roll, country, Americana, folk in there. And yeah, I think it has gone a little bit more with a little bit more of the folk Americana country sound in there. And part of that is we brought in Alan Love, who's an awesome pedal steel player in the Triangle, to play pedal steel on a few
Okay.
songs. So I think anytime pedal steel's there, it's going to have a little bit more country
It's
vibe.
definitely going to lean it one way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and as you mentioned, have played in several different bands over the years. So I think since we last talked, I did a month-long tour filling in with American Aquarium.
Oh, okay.
When they were going through some lineup changes, they needed a guitar player for a run in Europe, which I was
Oh,
more
cool.
than willing to go do.
You want to come to Europe with us? Yeah.
And I've known those guys for years, and the guys that were in the band at that time I'd known forever and ever, and I've known BJ. We both went to NC State together at the
Oh,
same
okay.
time. Some of our first shows in Raleigh were together forever ago.
Wow.
um,
I
I
know
should
you
be,
guys have opened for. I know Jack the Radio has opened for um, Avett Brothers
yeah, yeah.
before. I know. I've met Joe Kwan a few times. He's a cool guy.
He's a super nice guy. Um, yeah, and then in addition to that, I was playing with a group called New Reveille for a couple years. We did a record in Nashville, and spending a few months in Nashville will influence
Mhm.
anybody, I think. Um,
Yeah, New Reveille was the very last episode of the set list we did.
yeah. Oh,
So,
wow.
so I think the very end of our thing was the very beginning of that thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Oh, that's awesome.
well, you've been really generous with your time. I'll get you out on this. So when I go back and I try to look you up online, I obviously find a lot of Jack the Radio stuff. There's also some New Reveille things and everything. Don't see a lot of solo performances from George Hage. So, one, thank you for this rare opportunity, to get a solo performance for you. But do you enjoy performing by yourself?
So it's
Don't
pretty
say
good.
no right before you do your solo performance, but
Yeah.
but
You'll
I mean,
find
it's
out. You'll
yeah,
find
it's
out soon, man. No, it's honestly, it's something I haven't pushed myself to do. Oddly enough, that TEDx that you mentioned, I ended up doing 3 songs at, and that was the first time I had like really done a solo performance. And I didn't tell them ahead of time. I just was like, yeah, I'll play some songs. And then, kind of the week of, I was like, oh crap, like I've never really done this other than
Mhm.
like small things or like for some friends. It's so fun to play with other people, to like feed off other people's energy, to like, especially with writing or being in a band with other people, like just seeing their
Mhm.
process and like learning from them is one of my favorite things. So playing by myself is fun, and doing these solo shows has been a lot of fun actually, and it's pushed me because there's also nothing to hide behind.
Yeah.
There's no drummer, no other people on stage to kind of lean on or hide behind. So it's pushed me a lot
Mhm.
to really focus on lyrics, which I tend to occasionally forget words because I'm human.
It happens.
Uh, but also just focusing on like my singing, my playing, um, trying to get as nuanced as I can and dynamic as I can with my playing and singing, because it's all on me. Where in the band setting, you can get dynamics built with the drummer, you can get dynamics built with guitar effects or a guitar solo, or a groove and bass line. But
Mhm.
solo, you kind of have to figure out how to do that in different ways. So I've really been enjoying trying to hone that in.
Nice. Well, we look forward to it. This interview should be airing shortly before the concert happens. So hopefully in a
Awesome.
few minutes, we will get to see the show. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Thank you so much for doing the show. Where can people go to find out more about you, check out more of your work?
Yeah, and appreciate you having me and appreciate you talking with me. But yeah,
Absolutely.
basically everything is at jacktheradio.com for the band. The music is available on CD, vinyl, but also streaming services wherever you stream music. And as far as my artwork, you can find that at george-hage.com, and Hage is Hage. Um, and you can find all kinds of different art projects that I've worked on and different people that I've worked with there as well, and
Awesome.
music as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, George. It's been awesome talking with you. We look forward to the show and also seeing what else you got coming for us in the future.
Awesome. See you soon.